In this video, I want to show you how to use the various guides that come with the Drippy Cat Art Studio, and I'm going to do that by tracing a picture of my cat, Luna. So for this, I'm inside my A4 watercolour folder. I'll try granulated medium 02, swipe to the left, and I'll duplicate. Call up the file. It's got a fairly coarse texture, and so I hope that it's going to be easy for you to see in future lessons. But look, let me show you the picture I want to trace off. I'm going to pinch inwards a little bit because I want a little bit of space around my paper file, because I will come to my wrench icon, add is selected, and I'm going to insert a file. I'm inside folder 08, the practice files. I've got Luna Sunday Garden. Luna, my lovely little cat. I'm going to make her bigger as well. I don't want all the back end. I want to capture her face and part of her body like this. So if I open up my layers panel, the file got brought in. Now that it's in, you can see how much that granulated medium paper layer is affecting things. Look, if I turn it off, that's my picture. If I turn it back on again, immediately you're getting a very strong textured effect. So I might play around with the opacity of that layer. I will turn it off for now because it's a little bit distracting. Okay, so what I want is a sketch of Luna. Now I could create a layer, choose a pencil. Let's just try on one of the drawing layers. DC sketch is fine. I will choose a color. Let's come to the top of my colors. I normally use this blue, process blue, to do my tracing. It's just a habit I got into over the years. I suppose I could just start tracing over Luna, in which case I make the layer with Luna less visible. I'm lowering the opacity slider down to what? Around about halfway. That way, when I choose my layer 3, which is my sketching layer, I can see quite clearly when I'm doing my sketching lines. But supposing I don't want to trace, I know that a lot of people, when they're learning, they trace. That is fine. But often you find people want to start moving away from it and trying to drawing from observation. Well, there is kind of a stepping stone that you can do. It's been around for absolutely years. It is called the grid method. We can do it digitally, and because we're doing it digitally, there's one or two advantages. Well, let me show you what I mean. I will 3-finger swipe down and come to clear layer. Let's start again. I will come back to my wrench icon. Add is selected. I'm going to insert another file. This time I'm going to go up a level to my Drippy Cat Art Studio, but now I'm going to come to folder 07, grids and guides. I'm going to choose DC grid 01. There it is, and there's my grid. Now when you import a file, you always come to this transform menu. This is where you get to move your files around. If you take a look at the options at the bottom, I have uniform selected. That means I can resize, I can rotate, I can move, but in uniform mode, I can't start pulling this grid around in lots of weird and interesting ways. It's pretty easy to move. Just put your pencil anywhere, outside or inside the grid, and you can move it around to where you want it. If you want it bigger, you can see I've got little blue dots all around the outside of that surrounding box with the little marching ants going around. I can come to one, I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller. If I wanted to, I could come to the green dot at the top and rotate it around like this. And if I pull the rotation handle out a long way, I can rotate by a very fine amount. I don't want to do that, so 2-finger tap to undo that particular movement. But what I want to do is arrange this grid so that it's surrounding the important bits of Luna's face. Also, I'm going to try and move it across so that I'm starting to get where the lines of the boxes intersect, or the corners of the boxes. I want them to be somewhere fairly significant. Like, for example, the little bit I'm circling now, can you see where those lines are intersecting just around the base of Luna's nose? That could probably help me. I would like to make this a bit bigger though. To about, say, that a little bit bigger, I think. Because what I want is for those lines to intersect around the bottom of Luna's nose. Oh, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. If I go across one and up one, you can see the next cross section is just at the top of Luna's nearest eye, the top of the pupil. So as an ideal, but it's not strictly necessary. you get some important landmarks on whatever you're drawing in the crosshairs of those various different boxes. Okay, so I like that. I will come to wherever, like my layers panel, and there's my grid. Now here comes the slightly clever bit. I'm going to come to my draw here layer with Luna on. I'm going to increase the opacity up again. It doesn't have to be bang on 100%. I want to see plenty of detail there. Also, I want to be able to see the grid clearly as well. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and it will depend upon your picture. Oh, and this picture of Luna, yes, that is available as a download. So this is where it gets clever. I'm going to pinch in quickly and let go, which sizes my picture so that the edges of the picture go right to the edges of my iPad. This is the biggest size that I can see all of the picture in one go. Then, depending on which side you're holding, I want you to press the on/off button plus one of the volume buttons at the same time, and you get this. You get a screenshot. I tapped on it and I can edit it. And I'm going to come to the top right. I'm going to click on the tick mark, and it says at the top, save to photos. I'm going to save this to photos. Right, now, the draw here layer has the picture of Luna on there. I can either swipe down with 3 fingers, or I can tap on the icon which I'm circling, and I get clear. I clear the picture. I come to the layer above with the grid on, and I'm going to lower the opacity right the way down. Now, come up to the wrench icon again. Next to the add button, you've got canvas. Tap on that. Come down to where it says reference, turn it on. You get this, a little reference box, which I'm dragging by putting my pen or my finger just where I'm circling and drag around. I can also drag the corner around with my finger. Now at the moment, it's just showing me the canvas, so what? Well look, come to where it says image, import image. It takes me to my photos library. And in the top left-hand corner, I've got the screenshot I just took. Tap on that. There is my picture of Luna, and there is the grid which I overlaid on top of the picture of Luna. The picture is now gone, but this is where I can come in, come down to my draw here layer. DC Sketcher is selected. I want it a little bit smaller. I'm on what, 13%? I don't need it on 100% opaque, so maybe take it down to 76%. Let's try that. Let's just put in a couple of markers. Do you remember? I put the crosshairs of a couple of squares just at the base of her nose. If I take a look at the point which I'm circling on the screen, well, that's that point, isn't it? And if I go diagonally up and to the right, that bit there, that is where her nose is placed. So 2-finger tap to undo that, and I have a start of a nose just here. And if I have a start of a nose there, let's take a look at the 4 boxes surrounding that nose. Well, if I go up diagonally 1 and to the right, I've got the top of her pupil there. If I go to where the bottom of the nose is, and I go across, and I'm going to measure this in tenths. If I go across to the left, the edge of Luna's cheek is about, what, 4.5 tenths along that line. Well, that looks about halfway, so it's just a little bit in from there. What about if I go down from the center of the nose? I have the underside of Luna's chin, which looks about 7 or 8 tenths down. And if I carry that on, I've got another reference point of the underside of Luna's chin about there. Let me just start to draw this in, because you might be looking at this thinking, what's he talking about? Look. This is roughly where the underside of Luna's chin is. If I go down about 1, maybe 2 tenths, that's just where her mouth is. There. The top of her nose looks about, what, between 3 and 4 tenths. Now, the problem I'm getting at the moment is the squares I'm actually drawing on are a little bit smaller than the squares on the reference photo. Well, that's not a problem. I can always increase the size like this so that 1 square of what I'm drawing is now just about the same size as 1 square of my reference picture. That's making life easier for me. So I've got the top of her nose about here, and just working this round, I've got the corner of the top of her eye about there, and it comes down at a slight angle, and the other side of her eye on the line that I'm looking at, again, I'm estimating it looks about 4 tenths in, so that's the other side of her eye, which then goes up like this. Do you see what's happening here? I'm using the grid to plot out points. And because this is all laid out for me, it really helps with Look, this isn't tracing. I'm getting various different reference points to help me, but then I'm filling in the bits because there's space in between the lines of the squares where I am estimating distances. How far along any one particular line can I see the side of Luna's face, or the top of Luna's nose, or the edge of Luna's eye? And so it really is kind of a halfway house. You're getting very solid anchor points which can give you the confidence, but you are also measuring. And that's one of the great strengths of this method. Look, if I move across to maybe there, then move this along here, again, I can start estimating the bottom of Luna's pupil is about there. The top of her eye is about there. I've got a little shape, a little curve here, and that is the top of her eye. I've got a little shape on the other side. That is the other side of Luna's eye. And I build things up this way. And if I keep on drawing, I end up with this, a sketch. It's just simply using those squares to help me plot my points. It's called the grid method. And because we're doing this digitally, we have a number of advantages. Let me show you a couple of things. I will come to insert a file, grid and guides. If I use DC Grid again, now supposing I was setting this up and there was a photo underneath it. Well, one thing I could do, as I get more confident, is to make the squares bigger. That way I have to do more guessing, distances, angles, how far along the lines, the reference points of the photograph are in. And as I make the grid size bigger, it starts to mean that you need to judge your distances more consistently. So as you get better with this, make your grid size bigger, give yourself a challenge. And the good thing is, a lot of the drawing skill of just simply copying what you see on a photograph, for example, is just a case of measuring distances and angles. And so this method and making the grid size bigger can gradually introduce you and give you practice with doing just that. Here's another thing as well. There's no reason that you have to have the grid absolutely horizontal and vertical. You can put it at an angle. I mean, this face of Luna is at a slight angle like that. But that's okay, because as soon as I take the screenshot and then call it up for my photos inside my reference, this little window, because I'm looking at a screenshot, those lines will appear at the same angle when I call it up inside photos. Okay, well, this is lovely, but here's possibly the main difficulty that you get. Supposing you're starting out and you're feeling quite nervous and you really want to get things accurate, so you make your grid size maybe, say, that big. What's going to happen there is that, imagine I've just taken a screenshot, the grid is that size, and I'm plotting points across. The more squares you have, the more likely you are to start making reference marks on the wrong square. You might be one square too high or one square to the left to where you should be, and you get it wrong that way because all you're looking at is a simple grid. This is the way it's been done for probably centuries, because you have to draw out a grid using a ruler or a set square, and so the grid is the obvious thing to do. I will clear this. Let's call up the cat again, just so that it looks clear enough. Practice files, there's Luna, make it nice and big again, there. New layer. Let's also hide my reference as well, and come to add, insert a file, come back to my grids and guides, because here's the thing, the grid we've been using is functional, it's effective, but it's a bit monotonous. Let's try DC Grid 02. Oh look, it's a grid, but this time it's different colours. I will lower the opacity. I will also lower the opacity of Luna. And the theory goes, you make it so that you can see the colours of the grid plus Luna underneath, and you take a screenshot of that. In that way, instead of wondering which square you're supposed to be on, you know that if you're working on, say, the eyes, you can go, I am working on a purple grid here, or I'm working on a brown grid. And if I'm around the mouth, I've got a transparent area where the nose is, just going down to a purple square. So because you've got colour to help you, you are less likely to make the mistakes. Let's clear that. Let's come and insert another file. Let's try DC Grid 03. So now I'm doing around the eyes. Okay, well, the closest eye to us is square number D3 and D4. I know exactly which square I'm supposed to be looking at. And not only do you know because the squares are all numbered, but you know that part of the corner of Luna's eye is just on the D of D4. Let's clear that. Let's come to insert a file. It doesn't have to be lettered. It can be as mad as you want. DC Grid 05. The bottom of Luna's nose is just above that N. The corner of Luna's eye is just brushing up against that funny shape that you can see right there. So there's no way you're going to get confused with squares with this, because it's a whole load of unique symbols which are all just there to act as reference points. And the reason you can do this is because traditionally you have to draw out your grid again and again and again, and to do something as complicated as all these symbols would just take way too long, and it's just not practical. But with digital, that's already done for you, and it can be used again and again and again. The grid method was always about providing you with reference points, but if you think about it, those reference points do not have to be the lines of a grid. They can be anything, like this series of symbols. And if you're thinking that's way too easy or too complicated, all right, let's clear it. Come back to insert a file again, DC Grid 05. I can make it as big as I like and do what we did before. Increase the size to give yourself more of a challenge. Because everything's bigger, there are fewer reference points, and then you take a screenshot of that, call it up in Photos, and then you start drawing your various points that way. So this is the grid method updated for the 21st century. Okay, time for me to stop talking.